I was driving home from my friend's house. It was late, I don't know exactly the time, but if I had to guess it was probably 2 or 3 a.m. I lived 20 minutes away, which wasn't too far since most houses around here are spread out. The rain and lack of streetlights made it hard to see though, so I was driving slower and more carefully. 5 minutes down the road, I pulled up to a traffic light. I had the red light, but there was a blue car on the other side who was on the road, partially in the intersection. Its headlights and everything were on, but it was just sitting there at a green light. I couldn't tell if there was something wrong, or maybe they were asleep, but when the lights changed, I drove forward, slowly maneuvering around them. I tried to discreetly look in their car as I passed, but the rain on my window blocked most of my view. Only a moment after passing them and driving down the road again, the blue car turned and started following me down the road, so it wasn't broken down after all. I kept my eye on the mirrors. I wouldn't consider myself a paranoid person, but the situation felt staged. Another minute down the road, the car's headlights started getting brighter in my mirrors as they pulled their car closer to what felt like just a couple of feet from my back bumper. In weather like this, that made me really uncomfortable. I looked back at the road, but saw a small light pop up on my dashboard. It was a signal that one of my tires was low on air. A common signal, but it felt like an odd time for it just to pop up, given the situation. I looked back in my mirrors, seeing the car still tailing me. They were so close, their headlights almost made it hard to even see the actual car. I was just 4 or 5 minutes away from home, nearing the entrance to the neighborhood, when my dashboard started flickering a new signal. Flat tire. My stomach dropped. The second I saw that signal, I put all the pieces together and was almost 100% sure that this car behind me had done something. I drove another minute, hoping to make it closer to home, but I could feel my car sinking to the left, and I was practically driving on the rims now. I had to pull over. The car behind me did the same. I should have called someone as soon as I parked, but I was so concerned and focused with what the person behind me was doing that it didn't even cross my mind. Though, even if I did call someone, it probably wouldn't have prevented what happened next. Once parked, 3 doors opened from the car and 3 men came out. I only had a few seconds to prepare and react, but I was helpless and defenseless. They ran up to my car, 2 on my side and 1 on the other. One of the men came right up to my window, yelling at me to open the door and pointing a gun at me. It happened so fast, I was just in some dazed state. I started to reach for the door, but the man by the back door smashed something against the window, shattering it, then reached his hand in and opened the back door. They were all still yelling, both at me and at each other. The man in the back reached across, opening the other back door, then reached in front of me to open my door. I was still just sitting there, holding my hands up now to show I wasn't a threat. I knew there was no way out of this, even if I did have a weapon. Once my door was open, the man with the gun pulled me out of the car and slammed me on the ground. The oddest thing is while I was on the ground, looking out into the rainy pavement, all I was thinking about was how cold and wet the pavement was. Not about how I had a gun being pushed into the back of my head, or that I was being robbed and beaten. I think it was my head trying to distance myself from the traumatizing situation I was in. I wasn't on the ground for long before the men by the car called out, and the guy holding me down hit me in the back of the head, causing me to ricochet off the pavement. I wasn't even sure if he hit me with the gun or just his fist, because I was already numb. I'm surprised it didn't knock me out though. I heard their car doors close, and then driving away. I rolled over, still in a daze, and tried to pick myself up. They'd taken my phone, so I was forced to drive my car home and call the police when I got there, which ended up denting and damaging my rims anyway. The investigation went nowhere, determining only that the suspects had purposefully placed small tire spikes in the road at the intersection I crossed them at. I got lucky to have only hit one spike, and for it to have caused less damage than usual. They likely planned to ambush me as soon as I hit the trap, but in the end, it didn't make a difference. I'm 24, and I lived alone with my dog, Bear, in a cozy townhome up until 3 months ago. I moved in when I turned 22, having a decent enough job. I loved the home, being the first place I'd ever rented for myself, but 2 years of happy living was ruined by this one night. It was gloomy outside and raining quite a lot. It was my day off, so I was sitting on a chair in my living room, scrolling on my phone. It was 8 p.m., which was just an hour before I usually went to bed. Bear had been sitting by the back door for a while, looking outside. He started whining and ran up to me, which was his way of communicating to me that he needed to go outside. I got up and let him out, then closed the door and stood in the kitchen. While it was just a townhome, there was a small fence separating the backyards, so I didn't have to worry about Bear running away or anything. Also, I should mention that Bear isn't a large dog at all. He's just fluffy and small, like a teddy bear. Not long, maybe 15 or 20 seconds after I let him outside, I heard him whimper and bark. It was very clearly a cowering bark, like he was running away from something. It scared me, and I rushed to the door and looked out, seeing Bear running back towards me with his tail between his legs. Once he was inside, I leaned my head outside and scanned the backyard, expecting a coyote or something to be lurking by the fence, but nothing was there. I made sure Bear was okay, then locked up my door. He never does anything like that, so that made me really worried for him. I let him sit on my lap for the rest of the night. Through the next 30 minutes, he was constantly perking his head up and staring at the windows and doors, a different one each time. Then, after 45 minutes of sitting there, Bear turned his head and stared at the window behind me, lowering his ears and growling. "Bear?" I said, turning to look where he was looking, and right in the window, just a couple feet from us, was a man staring back at me. He was almost right up against the glass. I jumped up and screamed, stepping backwards as the man sprinted away down the side of the house. Bear started barking again from the sudden chaos. I closed the blinds and checked all of the others, making sure they were closed as well. From the quick glimpse I got, I didn't recognize the man. I didn't know who he was, or what he was doing here, or why he was staring at me. I tried to listen for any more indications that he was still around, but the rain outside was too loud, covering up any possible sounds. Bear seemed calmer though, so I stayed up for a while longer just to be safe, then went upstairs and had Bear sleep in my room with me. It took a long time for me to fall asleep, having a lot on my mind, but after an hour or so, I slowly dozed off. When I woke, Bear was standing up right by the bedroom door, staring at it. This was a freaky thing to see, waking up in the middle of the night, but not even seconds later, I heard something below me. A man talking. And not long after, a man on the other side of the house talking back. Their footsteps were loud, and they didn't even seem to be whispering either. It was like they didn't care if I knew that they were inside my home. My bedroom door was locked, but I had nowhere else to go. I went over to Bear quietly, trying to keep him calm, then picked him up and went over to the corner of my room, behind the bed. It took me a while to realize, but then it struck me that I hadn't heard any noises at all in the past minute. No steps or voices. This was when I took my phone out and called the police, whispering as softly as I could. As I told them my address, Bear started a low growl, then began barking and whining as 2 sets of footsteps started making their way up the stairs. I begged for the operator to send someone immediately. The two men started talking to each other again, but it was hard to make out their words. "Hey, we just want to talk. We're not here to hurt you." I screamed, saying I called the cops and for them to leave. I was panicking, not knowing what else to do. There was a pause afterwards. "We're here to help you," one of the men said. I didn't respond as I was busy trying to muffle my crying. "Open the door!" It got quiet again. I could only hear them breathing behind the door for what felt like a whole minute, before one of them walked back down the stairs. I couldn't tell where they went downstairs, or if they'd left or not, but I was sure that it was just one set of footsteps that left the bedroom door. It was so quiet though, and I couldn't hear any breathing. In the far distance, the soft sound of sirens started to get louder. A sense of safety was finally coming back. Once the sirens got closer, I heard footsteps running out of the house downstairs, but now I was unsure of where the other man was. It seemed really unlikely for him to be by my door still, but I could swear I'd never heard him leave. I waited for the police to pull up and make their way inside. I heard them searching downstairs, then slowly make their way upstairs and knock on my door. I almost didn't want to answer, still thinking that other man had to be somewhere nearby. When I opened the door though, it was just an officer. I immediately told him about my concerns. He directed me out of the house as one of his partners continued searching, but nobody was found. The only thing they were able to find was watery footprints all around the house, as well as an unlocked window, which, to be honest, I wasn't sure if I kept locked or not. It terrified me though, feeling so confident that the other man was still there, never hearing him leave, but then there being no trace of him. It made it impossible to sleep at night, having this feeling of someone still in the house, watching me. I moved out 3 months ago. It was too much stress on my mind, having a loose end like that, especially since neither of them were ever identified or arrested. There was no clear intention the men had either, which is just another question added to the list of uncertainty. Even now, living miles away in a new apartment, I still sometimes feel like I'm not alone. I work at a convenience store at the corner of a small shopping strip. It's basically a smaller, local version of a 7-Eleven. I worked morning shifts for a while, which started at 3 a.m. and ended at 1 p.m. I agreed to these shifts because they were always the slowest and required the least amount of work. All the parts of my job included tending to customers, filling the shelves, and taking out the trash, which pretty much meant I had nothing to do. It was the middle of winter at the time this happened, but I live in a warmer state, so it usually rains instead of snows. It was a light pour outside, but it was enough to keep most people away. On early mornings like these, I like to lean against the front of the building outside and smoke to pass the time. I wasn't supposed to, but there wasn't anyone to stop me. Along the shopping strip were maybe 8 or 9 other stores connected to ours. All of them were stores with normal hours, so none of them were ever open until around 6 or 7 in the morning. So, when I saw a car pull into the parking lot while I was smoking outside, I of course assumed they were coming to the convenience store. I burned out my cigarette and tossed it in the trash, then headed back inside and around the corner. There really was nothing to do, so I was just waiting for the customer to come in and leave so I could get back to being bored alone. After a few minutes of nobody coming in though, I walked back around the corner and checked outside the door. The car was still there, parked in a parking space nearby, but the headlights were off, and as far as I could tell, nobody was inside. Again, it was lightly raining outside, and all the other stores were still closed, so I was a bit confused as to where they went. I took one last look around, seeing nobody, then closed the door and went back inside. 30 more minutes of nothing went by, and I think I was just standing in the same spot behind the counter for the whole time, spacing out. I checked the time, seeing I'd only been at work for a little over an hour, and decided I should check the trash cans around the store and toss them in the dumpster out back. I walked around to each trash bin, putting the bag in the cart and replacing it with a new bag. As I was doing this, I heard a faint click sound come from outside. It sounded like something snapping or breaking, but between the rain hitting the roof and the sound being somewhat far away, it was impossible to tell what it was or where exactly it came from. In the moment it happened though, I barely even thought about it. It just didn't seem like anything worth thinking about, just another random sound these old buildings made. Once I filled the cart with all the trash bags, I rolled it into the back room and unlocked the back door that led to the dumpster. I sighed, seeing as the rain was pouring down harder now, of course right when I actually needed to go outside. Regardless, I pushed the cart through the rain and over to the dumpster, which was directly across from the door. After tossing in all the trash, I turned back and started heading for the door, but I noticed something was out of place. The store directly connected to mine had its door wedged open. I'd never seen anyone there earlier than 6, so it made me think. I went back inside to get out of the rain and went out to the front door and looked at the other store's door. All the lights were off and it looked locked up and empty like it always was at this time. I thought for a few more minutes before figuring I had nothing better to do and went back outside by the dumpster and walked up to the open door. Again, all the lights were off, but it seemed to lead into a small closet-type room, which then had another door, probably leading to the main storeroom. I stepped inside, standing in between the doorway so as to not make it seem like I was trying to sneak in or something. Standing inside now, I could hear someone moving around in the other room, walking, opening drawers. It sounded like they were making a mess, which then got me thinking even more. "Hey, is everything okay in there?" I called out, hoping to get a reassuring response from a neighboring store worker. The noises stopped. I waited a few seconds before I realized that this was not normal and something was definitely wrong. I stepped back outside and into the rain. As I quickly made my way back to my store, I recognized something was missing from the door I had just left. It took a second to figure it out, but then I saw that there was no handle. It was just an empty hole where the handle and lock usually are. Then I looked down at the wedge that was holding the door open, seeing now that it was actually the broken door handle. I ran back into my store, locking all the doors, and called 911, as well as my store manager. Once I knew they were on their way, I went up to the wall connecting our stores and put my ear against it, listening to the suspected robbery taking place. Whoever it was had to have known that I called the police, because they were moving quickly now, running all around, tossing or knocking things over. After 30 seconds to a minute of this, I saw lights flash outside and heard sirens approaching the back of the building. The footsteps quickly moved to the back of the store before a bunch of loud yelling came, which I assume was the officers. I checked out the back door after a minute, seeing a less hectic scene, and walked out to talk to the officers. I thanked them for coming so quickly and gave them a statement. The man who was arrested was found with a pillowcase full of nearly $6,000 worth of stolen items. He also had an empty firearm, along with a variety of tools used to break down doors and locks. And, unknowing to me, he'd also broken into the store 2 spots down as well. It's unclear whether or not the man knew I was working at the time, but my store lights were on, so it isn't likely that he would have broken into my store. But several large scratches were found on the back of our door handle, which may have been from a previous attempt.